you do when you do it with me. My Lord, I like that though. I like what you do when you're doing it with me. You got to say it again. I like what you do when you're doing it with me. My Lord, how we say? I like what you do when you're doing it with me. Woo! What you do?
Welcome back. David Penn here. Professor Penn Podcast, episode number 133. WYRD. Talk about WYRD tonight. But we started out with something that was exceptional. Exceptional. Boy, what a voice. You know, the Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi made that famous. But I'll tell you, it pales in comparison to the original deal. I could listen to that voice. Oh, it's just, and cool and soul. And that's kind of what WYRD is about in its own kind of way. We're going to talk about what WYRD is about because we got all this weird labeling going on, weird labeling. And I think that it's time to talk to each other in a way that's fully informed. From my perspective, doesn't mean I'm right. I just have my perspective. We say that all the time. There's lots of different street corners. We're living in an era right now where figuring out what's right and wrong is getting increasingly challenging because there's so much information and disinformation. So it becomes incumbent, I think, on some of I hate to say it like this too, because I don't like seeing myself this way. But the older people that used to have to look things up. Like when I went to school, there was no Google. We went down to the library. They had this, I can't even remember. There was a name for it. There was some kind of system to find information in the library at the university. They had hundreds of thousands of books. Do you remember that? You don't have any idea what I'm talking about. I need to look this up because I remember now in the old days before there was Google, they had these like index cards in big drawers. And you had a subject, and you look up the subject, and then subject, there'd be all these books, and then the books were numbered on the binding of the book, and you could find the book in these giant libraries based on that ordering system. That's what the librarians used to take care of for us. The librarians, the library, keeping the library of human knowledge organized such that it could be referenced. So if you wanted to study something, you had to go read the original text. And then a little bit later, we started getting a lot of PhDs that were summarizing the text for us. And here we are 50 years later, and guess what? How do we know? Well, the truth was we didn't know then. We don't know. And that's the most dangerous thing. It's not what we don't know that hurts us. It's what we think we know that isn't so that hurts us. That's dangerous. Got a lot of that going around. So I wanted to talk about this this weird thing. Can you play number 2? Thank you. Good morning, Tanner. Number 2. Let's get number 2 queued up there.
Take a look what happened.
One more time is good. Let's let it go a couple of times. Play it a little bit more. One more time.
Take a look what happened.
Right by there. Wow. Holy smokes. Now, as we said on the episode Miracles, whether it is or isn't a Tohoyo miracle as we had in the Pulp Fiction script, is not the issue. It's if we feel touched by the intervention of God. And I look at that and I go, whoa, that's rather miraculous. Rather miraculous. But that's how I take it. Guy could be sitting on the street corner over there and say, hey, that's happenstance. Okay. But what's happened to this really seminal event in human history? It's been memory hold. It's gone. In fact, I think it's so gone that it's virtually forgotten. So all these people, these weirdos, weird people like me, look at that and they go, wow, that's intervention right there. I feel touched by divine intervention. And that has nothing to do with whether or not it's about Trump or not. I would say that about anyone. And I urge you to go back. And some of the people in the live chat, believe it or not, went back and looked at Pulp Fiction and put in the comments that they saw Pulp Fiction and was like, wow, because this issue was covered amongst gangsters. You know, if gangsters are supposed to die in a gun battle and the bullets miss them, that's what that whole movie was about divine intervention. Was it or wasn't it? And there was this outpouring of Christian, faith around this issue. A lot of Christians said, wow, that's a sign. Now, I'm not here to talk about signs. What I'm talking about today is the concept of weird. Could you please play number 3?
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
As weird and creepy as J.D. Vance.
Super weird idea from J.D. Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird. They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird, and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate, they're weird. Deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird, it's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes even deeper.
He said a lot of things that are weird, a weird style that he brings, weird policies. Let's start with the weird thing, because it is a thing.
Just plain weird.
What was weird was talking about Diet Mountain Dew. Who drinks Diet Mountain Dew?
You ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me that an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior.
Weird and cultish.
These are weird people on the other side.
He kind of doubled down on his weird ideas.
I think weird is probably generous.
Simply weird. These guys are just plain weird.
Vance as weird?
You know, as the campaign said, weird.
It really is just plain weird.
J.D. Vance, plain weird.
No,
I mean, I don't know how else you could read it.
Weird. It is kind of weird.
We're not afraid of weird people.
The other side, they're just weird. Why are you being so weird?
Vance has done something more extreme, more weird.
No matter what kind of weird stuff they keep saying.
Trump and Vance are just weird, in addition to being dangerous to democracy.
It's the weird part that's the most engaging.
Whom he addressed as my beautiful Christians, which was super weird.
Weird tech bro, J.D. Vance.
He's a weird guy. J.D. Vance, uneasy and sort of weird.
Frankly, for lack of a better word, that he's weird.
Sarcastic remarks that aren't even funny, and he kind of shows that he can't really deliver a one-liner.
So, Sam, weird is the word here in terms of initial impressions from Vance to the American public.
Okay. Now, I've talked to some people about how I see this. Very smart people in my orbit. And what I recognize is very smart people have a different opinion than I do about what this means. Now, my different opinion is based on training, the people that trained me. I was with my son yesterday. He's in town visiting, and we talked about this. He says, well, I don't believe any of that, Dad. And my comment to him was, great. It really doesn't matter if you believe it or not. See, this is the thing that's so powerful about magic. And I mean M-A-G-I-C-K, magic. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. You're taught to believe it doesn't matter. So you don't pay attention. You don't really know what's going on. And when I use the you statement, I'm including myself because I didn't know what was going on. I just got plucked out of the crowd for whatever reason, and I got trained in weird stuff, real weird stuff. So what is weird? Well, if you look it up on Google and go to Wikipedia, it says weird, spelled WYRD, is a concept in Anglo-Saxon culture. That'd be the Anglos, Anglo-Saxons, Angles. They became the British. It's an ancient religion. It's an ancient religion. It's a religion. The Angles, a warrior religion. Weird is a concept in Anglo culture, roughly corresponding to fate or personal destiny. The word is ancestral to modern English the word weird, WEIRD, meaning of which has drifted towards an adjective use with a more general sense of supernatural or uncanny or simply unexpected. When they're using the term weird in that context, they're saying like weird, like not cool, not normal. Like we reject that. It's weird. Weird behavior, right? This comes out of the Old Norse, this word weird. There's words in the English language that we think of as just words, like place and thing and weird. But these are very special words. They're holdovers from Old Norse culture. And what was Old Norse culture? Like the Angles practice it, the Vikings they all had a different slant on it. But it was the Northern European nature religions that preceded the imposition at the point of a spear of the Holy Roman Empire's culture, which was Roman Catholicism and the divine right of kings, right? So there was a pre-existing culture, and as Rome moved into Western Europe, those cultures were conquered. But they didn't really go away. And that's the great secret of today. I bet you didn't know that, Mr. Tanner, that those old nature religions are prevailing right now. Those old nature religions were not Christian. And when they were conquered, because they were polytheistic religions, they incorporated into their pantheon of gods Satan, the Antichrist, which perverted them very quickly. But of course, they'd been conquered, raped, robbed, pillaged, and suppressed. So they were pissed, kind of like the Palestinians, pissed off. Rather die on their feet than submit on their knees. But many of them did submit on the outside, but on the inside, they continued to maintain the old way. People don't know this. Now, people are going to say, oh, Professor Penn, you're weird. Well, let me tell you, I was taught for many, many years by someone who was a practitioner of Norse magic, because it's the undergirding of extreme warrior skills. They teach the same thing in Asia. If you want to go see something incredible, just Google up North Korea Taekwondo military exhibition and just watch what these people do for fun, okay? Walking on hot coals, breaking bricks when your feet are on glass, having huge chunks of concrete smashed over your chest, getting hit in the head with baseball bats, getting kicked in the groin, full blast, and just sitting there with a smile on your face. These things are called in Korean cheryuk. They're kind of like circus exhibitions. Unless you're in combat, comes in real handy if somebody tries to stick a knife in you and the blade breaks. That'd be called iron shirt qigong. Now, of course, we don't believe that here. We don't believe it. We don't believe it. We don't believe it. We don't believe it. But you know what? I've seen some of these people do some stuff. And as a matter of fact, I've done some stuff that is outside the normal band of human behavior, human behavioral expectation. And that normal band is what we agree on as reality. How's reality working for you? 8% interest, $35 trillion of debt, a forever war. Our country's at war with itself. We've separated into two tribes. There's assassination attempts on former presidents. I could go on and on. I mean, reality, we're all focused on this reality. Who focused us here and why? And what's going on outside the band of reality? So this weird thing, weird if you go back as far as what I understand or how I understand it, this idea of that they have right in Google. It's an adjective with the general sense of the supernatural, and it's about destiny. It's about destiny. It's about fate. And I've said many times, the only people that can predict the future are those that create the future. Well, how do you create the future? Well, that's what all secret societies are about. Creating the conditions such that the future I envision is manifest. Well, that's kind of politics, isn't it? Isn't that politics? Isn't that what we do in politics? We organize, we have a vision, a plan, we go implement the plan, and our will be done as the will of the people. So this weird thing, here's what really happened here, in my opinion. J.D. Vance, the vice presidential pick, is a self-avowed Catholic. And there's a lot about him that is couched in the religious. If you noticed, even one of those commentators said, oh, Vance used the word "my beautiful Christians." Isn't that weird? So who's the weird people? Because, when those Roman Catholic warriors, the Roman warriors, went into Western Europe and they ran into a group, they said, there's the weird, kill them. The weird, the people that believed in the nature, religion, the culture of Northern Europe, the Vikingers. They were weird. So I'm a Roman soldier and I see a group of dudes. I look at them and go, they're weird, kill them. That's what they did. It was an identifier. It was not an adjective. It was a noun. The weird. And who was calling who? So these soldiers that were informed by Catholicism, which is monotheism, which is the Judeo-Christian underpinnings of our society, were identifying polytheists in all the glory of their ritual as the weird. They were out to conquer those people, conquer them. And when I was your age, we knew what weird was. We had a general cultural understanding amongst the boomers of what weird was. And you know what? Now I'm being called weird by the people that we think are weird. I want you to think about this now. Please stay with me. If you think I'm weird, okay, I get it. Because we're getting out here where things really happen. Yes, people can march into battle and kill each other, and that's real. But the action that undergirds that battle is the world of ideas. That's why we're doing the Professor Penn podcast. Where did we come from? How do we get here? And where are we going based on knowing where we're at? And where we're at is a battle of theological ideologies. We're fighting about, do you believe in God or don't you believe in God? And if you do believe in God, what God do you believe in? That's what this battle's about. It's just obscured over taxes and regulation and woke ideology. That's a cover story. We got to get it down to its constituent elements. So all these people that are Democrats, which is the same thing as communists. Democrat is the Democrat Party of my parents has been occupied by the communists. Fully, completely, and from end to end. Okay. Communism is the denial of monotheism. It says that belief in God is an illusion. As Freud wrote an entire book, another anti-Jew, The Future of an Illusion, about religious belief. It was an illusion. You know, the Jews of Europe that wanted to get in on the Industrial Revolution and were rejecting the poverty and the faithfulness of their parents just said, hey, you people are tripping. Dad, you're weird. I'm going to the city and getting a job, and I'm going to marry a blonde-haired girl with blue eyes. And that's what happened. I know that sounds awful, but, you know, I'm just being frank about it because I grew up in it. And they abrogated Christ and Yahweh in one swift move and created communism, which we think of as an economic strategy, but it's actually an anti-religious strategy. It's the abrogation of the Judeo-Christian history of mankind. Okay, so what's this weird thing? So we've got these communists that don't believe in God, don't believe in Christ. They certainly don't. It doesn't matter if they say they do, because when you throw all the fundamentals of a culture out, you're no longer practicing that religion. You can say you are. You can choose any identity you want to. We're going to talk about the Jewish identity. Anybody can, I could call myself an elm tree. Who cares, right? I'm an elm tree. Great for me. Where's your trunk? Where's your branches? Where are your I don't need that. I don't have to have a trunk to say I'm an elm tree. In a very similar way, we've got these communists that maybe they say they're Christians or they believe in God, but they don't do anything that's involved with believing in God based on the tradition. They're communists. They're seeking equity. And when you talk about having equal outcomes, that's communism. So they're rebranding everything to make it sellable to a semi-informed public, and it's semi-informed not because we're stupid. We just don't give a shit. We don't give a shit because we don't think there's anything we can do to change things. Well, let me give you a couple quick things as a sidebar. Number one, August 13th, Minnesota primary. Vote in the primary. If you're in the party, it's time to call and get all your friends and family to go to the primary. To do what? Vote for peace. Vote for the Minnesota GOP endorsed candidate, the only Minnesota GOP endorsed candidate, Mr. Royce White. You can do that. You can go to precinctstrategy.com and figure out how to get involved in the party. We can change Minnesota. We actually can do that. That's something we can do. What are these people doing? These people are organized. While we're sitting around thinking about getting organized, they're already organized. There's a high council out there somewhere with people that are populated with human beings that are highly educated. And they wrote a script because politics is theater. Media is theater. And all those pundits came with the same word, weird, on the same day. Doesn't that seem a little bit coordinated? Isn't that we don't have that kind of coordination. We don't coordinate like that. We're not a communist Borg. We're individuals, sovereign individuals. Don't tread on me. You can do anything you want, but don't step on my blue suede shoes, right? Remember that? Don't step on my blue suede shoes. I got them on. It's great. Don't step on them. We're individuals. These folks are in a collective. And when the word comes down from the High Council, highly trained intellectuals who have a religious perspective, and here's their religious perspective, they live to destroy Christ. That's their goal. Because when they destroy Christ, they destroy republicanism. And when they destroy republicanism, they've destroyed self-governance. And when they've destroyed self-governance, we're all dependent on them. They become God, the intellect of man, replacing our faith in the one true, everlasting. Can't even say the word because, I'm Jewish, right? I mean, I can. But I'm just saying, even when we say it's Christ or Yahweh, God's thoughts are so far beyond mine. All I know is it's out there. I just do the best I can to search for truth. And they don't want us searching for truth. So guess what? The people that don't believe in God, the people that the Roman Catholics called weird, suppressed them, beat them, thought they crushed them, but they didn't because it didn't go away. It went underground and it's reappeared in all kinds of other sneaky ways to destroy the 5,700-year tradition that goes back to Abraham. Back to Abraham, our prophetic tradition They're intent on destroying that. So all across media, the people that don't believe in God and were labeled as weird by the people who do believe in God gave it right back to us and said, hey, you people are weird. Weird, 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 weird. This is about reversing faith, reversing the power of faith, and convincing the people that are in the middle, the uncommitteds that really don't know, that if you have faith, you're weird. And then they have that cultural holdover that if you're weird, you're a witch. There's something wrong with you. You're into the supernatural. You're into magic. And guess what it says? These people are so sophisticated. Man, they're sophisticated. You know, in Deuteronomy it said, He is the one you praise. He, the Lord, is your God, who performed for you those great and awesome wonders you saw with your own eyes. I've seen it with my own eyes. Doesn't have to be a Tahoe miracle. It's what I see, right? But what's going on here? Listen to this stuff. These people are smart. When you come into the land, now we're talking about the Israelites, but it equally applied to the Romans when they conquered the northern European nature religions. When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, because what's the difference between Israel and England? There is none. That's another scam. Because wherever God is, God is. And wherever God isn't, God is. But the people could be lost. God's everywhere. It's the people that get lost. It's the institutions are fine. The people are corrupt. Listen to this. This is critical to know how sophisticated the energy that we're confronting. When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, is not gave you, is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering. Anyone who practices divination or tells fortune or interprets omens or is a sorcerer or a charmer or a medium or a necromancer or who inquires of the dead, or whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving them out before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God. These things are prohibited. We have our faith. We have our search for truth. Now, we live in a republic. We're Republicans. Better be as Democrats or Republican as parties. We're all Republicans. See, we gotta rebrand and use the word. Oh, you're a leftist? Did you know you were a Republican? And they're gonna look at you like, what? And get mad at you. Just stay with the facts. What is republicanism? The philosophy. The philosophy. It had a great strength. It overturned the divine right of kings in association with that Roman Catholic Church because it was never a Holy Roman Empire. That was also branding. It was a corrupt empire where people were ruled from on high by hereditary lines of kings and queens that derived their legitimacy from a corrupt church. And Republicans, man, who were they? They were enlightened men and women. They said, hey, you use the toilet the same as I do. Where does this king thing come from? What a scam. I'm throwing that off. I don't believe it. I'm the sovereign. And you priests, you're in on it. We're not going to include you in our new Republican forms of governance. We're going to remove the priests from ruling because you guys have lost it. We removed that. We've separated church and state because we understand the corruption that can come when secret societies like the church lose it to evil. And we're still seeing the effects of that today. I mean, there's just so much evidence we don't even have time to get into it. Judaism, same thing. It's corrupt in the extreme. Not faith. Faith is not corrupt. My individual search for truth is all about me not being corrupt. And that is the fundamental cornerstone of republicanism, anti-corruption. And they don't mean money. They mean my soul. You know, a soul's corrupt. Have you heard that before? You ever heard that a person can have a corrupt soul? Right. Taking the money is just a symptom. It's the corruption of the human being. Republicans are anti-corruption. Money is a symptom. They mean this corruption of the human soul. This is about preserving individual sovereignty, about unalienable rights that are granted to me as the sovereign by my Creator. Oh, wow. So when they did that and they removed the state religion, these other forms of worship, like paganism, Satanism, Luciferianism, and from the Protestant perspective, Catholicism and Judaism have been allowed, and Islam have been allowed to flourish in our country and in our republics, which is all of Western Europe, United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. These republics, these are the vestiges of republicanism and the vestiges of those desires to remove the corruption of the church was a great advance at the time. It freed the people, but it left a huge void. And you know, nature abhors a void, right? Something filled it. You know what filled it? A refilling of corruption. And that's why we have all these secret societies that dump all these ideas into their shock troops, which are all these communists who parrot the same script and label me a believer in the one true God. I'm weird for believing in the one true God. So they've taken what I called you and they put it right back at me. And isn't that the number one thing we've learned about Saul Alinsky? Rules for radicals. Another anti-Jew. Rules for radicals. Accuse your opponent of exactly who you are. Accuse who you're fighting with what you're doing. Kind of distracts people, doesn't it? Distracts people from the search for truth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for my American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending the Messiah that I might be saved. Forgive me, my Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. They can brand me weird all they want. I asked the guy that trained me when I started down the path, the way. Leland knows the way because he put it right in my chat about Lao Tzu. He who knows the way speaks not of it. That's Chinese because they put sugar on their popcorn. We preach the gospel to every living person on earth. It's the same thing, but a little bit different. What Lao Tzu is saying is, don't talk, set an example. If you know it, you don't got to talk about it. Be it. Be it, like Yoda. Don't try, do. The gospel. Preach the gospel. Talk. Okay? This is yin and yang. Synthesis. That's what republicanism is. It's synthesis. It's bringing these traditions together. When the traditions are separated, we are without power. But where it says in the New Testament that Christ moved through the crowd like a whirlwind, that's a warrior. A whirlwind, if you've ever fought more than one person at a time, like 3 people, fight 3 people, walk out of a bar and have 3 people attack you. Oh, if you're going to survive, you will move like a whirlwind. And you'll see that there's a synthesis. A synthesis. The power is in synthesis. So I asked the guy that trained me, because I was coming out of a Jewish tradition. This was before I met Christ. And I said to him, I said, sir, it says in the book, neither a soothsayer nor a magician be, because he was starting to teach me magic. Not magic like casting spells, although, think of the word spelling. Did you study your spelling? You get that one? Oh, it's right in the language, isn't it? Because our language comes from Northern Europe. We didn't make this up. We inherited this culture. In our arrogance, we think, oh, it's all about me. No. It's all about these cultures and these ideas. Spelling. When you write or you speak, we're casting spells. That's why there's such a high priority in religious tradition of choosing your words carefully. In Judaism, it said, you can kill a person with your words. Oof. I feel so much responsibility because I'm using my words, and I know people are listening to me. And man, that's pressure. It's pressure. The benefit is I'm up in my game. Let it not be my words. I want to speak appropriately, say the right thing as much of the time as I can. Of course, I fall short. But boy, can I just keep expanding? Can we as a community keep expanding how often we're appropriate? That's saying the right thing, doing the right thing at exactly the right time. That is skill. That's having soul. Like Sam and Dave, soul man. Doing the right thing at the right time. That's called, whoa, that's having some soul. But these people have come up because there's a high council out there. We don't even have our high council. Maybe this is the high council, this community. We got to have people that know what's going on and how things work, how things are manipulated behind the scenes. And then the script goes down to all the players on the stage, and they're calling all the Christians weird. And all the Christians are looking at themselves going, I'm weird. Yes, your faith has now been labeled as weird by the very people that we labeled as weird when we put them underfoot because they sacrificed their children. What is the fundamental building block of monotheism? We don't sacrifice our children. When Abraham went up on Mount Moriah and bound Isaac, he was willing to show his faith by killing his one only son, the son of his old age, a miracle. He was a very old man. His wife was barren when she had that child. Barren. And she still had this child. It was a miracle. And he took the kid. They walked up the Mount Moriah together. Can you imagine walking up? I got a son. I love him. I remember when he was 3 years old. Come on, Jake, we're going to take a walk. And I'm walking hand in hand with him, and I got a bunch of wood on my back and a big dagger. And I'm going to walk him off to the hill. And I'm, where are we going, Dad? Hey, we're just taking a walk, son. Stay with me. What's going on? Kid's talking. He's beautiful. Perfect. He's perfect. He's a virgin kid. He's beautiful. No blemishes. He's perfect. I'm walking along with him, and I'm taking him up, and I bind him up. He go, hey, Dad, why are you binding me up? No problem, kid. But now he's getting scared. And instead of him being sacrificed, God said, we don't sacrifice our children, Abraham. You don't. Thank you for showing me your faith. But that is something human beings have been doing that I don't want human beings to do. I don't require human sacrifice. I require the search for truth. That's the fundamental building block of our culture, that our children are spiritual entities that are the children of God, not the inventory of man. And what do we keep saying on the podcast? We're living in the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, where every citizen is reduced to inventory. Instead of being sovereign citizens, we're numbers to extract profit from. Oh, look at that. Look at that cornerstone of the faith, and they're calling that weird. They're calling that weird. Why are they doing that? You know, when I say this again, I'm going to leave this pregnant pause because I would like you to think, I'm asking you to think, why would the fundamental building block, because when you call it weird, you're calling it all weird, that our children are spiritual entities that are sovereign, why would that be weird? Why would you call that weird? Isn't that interesting? So who's smart enough and powerful enough to orchestrate all of media to come out like that on the same day? We've got a lot of organizing to do. We're not very organized yet. Could you please play number 4?
They always tell me that the problem is high taxes, but they're wrong. Of course, high taxes are extremely high here in the United States. I give you that. The real problem is not the high taxes themselves, but the fact that they are not even really funding the government. Not even those high taxes, higher than a lot of places in the world, not even those taxes are really funding the government. So who's financing the government? Government is financed by treasury bonds. And who buys the treasury bonds? Mostly the Fed. And how does the Fed buy them? By printing money. But what backing does the Fed have for that money being printed? The treasury bonds themselves. So basically, you finance the government by printing money out of thin air. Well, so if the government can print the limited amounts of money out of thin air, why do they collect taxes? The answer is simple, but it's very shocking. The real problem is that you pay high taxes only to uphold the illusion that you are funding the government, which you are not. It's shocking, but it's true. The government is funded by money printing, paper backed with paper, a bubble that will inevitably burst. The situation is even worse than it seems, because if most Americans and the rest of the world were to become aware of this farce, confidence in your currency would be lost, the dollar would fall, and the Western civilization with it. If the next president of the United States doesn't make the necessary policies and structural changes, sooner or later that bubble will burst. There's still time. You don't have to make the same mistakes we did in the 60s and the 70s. You can still jump before the water boils. Winning the election isn't enough to solve these problems. They will not simply go away as a consequence of an electoral result. It will take a total re-engineering of the government top to bottom. It will entail making difficult decisions. It will be hard. The system will push back, but you have the right to determine your own fate.
You know, if you can see the connection, if I'm doing a good enough job of sharing, and if I am able to see, I like to use the word you, please excuse me. I can see the connection between labeling everybody who's a faithful believer as weird and a complete and total farce. If you can see that connection, when the man says that's Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, who was elected in a landslide, who was labeled by the media as a dictator, as an autocrat, as an authoritarianism, who is cleaning up El Salvador. It's like a garden spot compared to what it was. And he's here lecturing Americans because his little country, it's easy to fix little compared to fixing big, but it's the same principles of searching for truth. But when he says that there's pushback, hey, when you're in a population, that's tiny, like Rhode Island, the pushback, the people, this system is so big. The pushback is so great, but what are they doing? What did he say? When the dollar falls, Western civilization falls with it. Did you hear him say that, Tanner? What is Western civilization? No, it is, well, you think of it as America, but what it is, Western civilization stands on the search for truth, the 5,700-year tradition of the Judeo-Christian culture. That's what Western civilization is. Okay? So what he's saying is when this bubble, this farce, this scam with paperback and paper, what kind of priests are involved in that scam? Who's running that deal? Same guys. That high council up there that has this thing working, they're the ones that just labeled all the Christians weird. Because what do we want? We want a balanced budget. We don't want Western civilization to fall. You see why this debt is a weapon of war that will result in the enslavement of all American citizens in a digital system that will monitor and control every aspect of their lives. Let me give you an example. Again, I was out with my son. He's about 30 years old. And I know all of his friends he grew up with, right? So one of his friends, I know this kid, good kid. He's a bartender. And my son goes, yeah, he's making good money. He's making $100,000 a year. I said, $100,000 a year? Wow. He can really get his life going on $100,000 a year. I said, you tell him to take like 30, 40,000 a year and invest it because he's so young. And with that kind of money, he can be a millionaire bartender. Oh, my son goes, he doesn't have that kind of money. I go, you just told me he makes $100,000. No, he has to pay taxes. He only has about 60. He's barely making ends meet. I said, wait a second. Stop right there. Doesn't he make his money on tips? That's cash, right? You mean he's reporting it? Man, what an honest dude. When I was young, nobody reported their tips. They stole them. He said, no, Dad. All the tips are digital now. They're all digital. And I thought to myself, wow. And then I made the mistake with my boy. I said, you people are dumb. And he got really pissed at me, which, he's my son. I don't always follow the same guidelines with my own people that I'm responsible for in blood like I do for the general community. But, my son, he's like me. He just got up and hammered back. I said, I'm sorry. But see, he's 30. He's so acculturated into this digital reality that tips being digital is like Christians being weird. It's the same thing, but a little bit different. The nature of reality is being changed. So when we have a $35 trillion debt, because here's the news that matters, and we're just going to have one this session on episode number 133, WYRD. Treasury estimates, this came out just a couple of days ago, that we only need to borrow an additional $1.3 trillion between now and the end of the year. Kind of a big deal, right? Just a mere bagatelle. It's $1.3 trillion. So on January 2nd, 2025, when we have a lame duck president, President Biden, and a lame duck Congress, the budget is going to be busted right there on January 2nd. The debt ceiling will have to be addressed or there'll be no more borrowing. And of course, because we weird Christians are not yet organized, once again, the debt ceiling will be raised. Our finances will be further undermined. And of course, if we have President Harris, hey, they got their girl, right? Remember President Trump? He borrowed $8 trillion. I mean, hey. Things that make me go, But you know what? When we're American citizens and we're involved in politics and we're organized and we're a digital army, we're all on X following at Highway 30, Royce White, at Prof Penn Podcast, and there's thousands of us together in a digital community like a digital army. We can advance ideas by posting and reposting and communicating, and it's cultural. All throughout our culture, by January 2nd, if we were organized and we understood the power that we really could take back and give to ourselves, the power of self-governance, we could prevent these people from continuing to lead us to a digital prison. We could stop it. As Bukele say, when the dollar falls, Western civilization falls. And when Western civilization falls, what falls? Well, that would be faith in God. Because that's what this game is all about. This war is, do you believe in God or do you not believe in God? And if you believe in God, what God do you believe in? That's what we're doing here. We're having a throwdown. And guess what? This throwdown goes back to, I don't know, forever. Oof. And then, of course, one of the things you got to do, because let's just think what we've done. I've made this case. The Republicans, not the party, the philosophy, Republicanism removed the priests because they were corrupt, and they installed in that spot the lawyers who use rationality and logic, standing upon that 5,700-year tradition to solve disputes like the judges of old. And they all went to Christian schools, and they were all thoroughly versed in the search for truth. And then they took that into their legal careers. And guess what? Over a couple hundred years, corrupt to the max. We got some holdovers. Because, like my mother, she was a leftist. She was corrupt, but she wasn't robbing and cheating. She was not robbing and cheating. She was working within the political process as she saw it. And here's the new one, and this is politics. So let's not be demonizing anybody because of politics. In what marks a major shift for President Biden, who was the former head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Biden is calling for Congress to back his proposals for two significant changes to the U.S. Supreme Court and a change to the U.S. Constitution. Wow. They're using Biden to advance, and it's kind of a scam because, we're just talking about it. Three big changes. Number one, no immunity for crimes a former president commits in office because, the Supreme Court recently ruled that there's some immunity issues. He calls it the No One is Above the Law Amendment. An amendment to the Constitution? Oh, that's a long trip. Term limits for Supreme Court justices, number two. Term limits. Right now, you become a Supreme Court justice, it's a lifetime appointment. That'd take legislation. 60 senators would have to agree unless they change the rules of the Senate, which they will. This is politics. Politics. The Republican idea is hanging by a thread. It's about to be replaced by the communist idea. And the third one is a binding code of conduct for the Supreme Court. Okay, great. This is called changing the nature of how that lawyerly class operates. And I'm all for discretion about a code of conduct. We don't want any justices getting corrupted because we don't know who they are. They can get corrupted like anybody else and be taking money. We don't need that. That's not a bad idea. Term limits? I don't know. I don't know. They're the wise men and the wise women. There's something about a lifetime appointment. That's what the Japanese called shibui. It goes back to the way back. Moses didn't have a term limit. It's a little bit dictatorial, but in a certain sense, it would balance out the term limits for senators. Why don't we start out with term limits for our elected officials? I mean, if we're going to be bandying about term limits, let's go all the way, okay? Not the people that right now are voting 6-3 to maintain republicanism, because that's what they're doing. See, if those guys were voting 6-3 to go communist, it'd all be good. All good. So this is politics. Let us not complain, my fellow citizens. Let us go join the precinct strategy. Let us get on X. Go to tireget.com, TIREGET.com. You have to buy tires. You might as well buy them from TireGet because it funds the movement. Free People Radio Store. Got to buy T-shirts. Why don't you buy them from us? What's the difference? I mean, you can buy them from a big box store. They're not going to take that money and recycle it into content that can change Minnesota and change the country. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to continue to spread wokeism because it makes them all powerful. If we're going to be sovereign citizens, we have to form our own patriot economy. Please think that way. Please. Yes, I'm not a communist. I'd like to make some money. But the money I'm making goes back into expanding what we're doing here. That's why we're a community. And there's many other people we want to bring into this that are small business people. And that's pejorative. They're self-governing. And we want to give them an opportunity to work with us as this community expands, because they'll take the money that they make being part of this community and put it back into doing what? Maintaining, preserving, and protecting the search for truth on planet Earth. Well, please play number 5, because some of these justices, they're just not corrupt. You can see it in their face. Take a look at this guy.
We will discuss the latest on the race to the White House with our panel in a second. But first, Shannon sat down with Justice Neil Gorsuch at the Supreme Court and has his response to President Biden's proposed reforms.
You are not in a bubble here at the court. There are real-world events happening. The president has proposed now changes to the court, supported, it appears, by the vice president, who looks like she's going to be the Democratic nominee. How does the court feel about potential changes, term limits, ethics codes that are enforced by someone in ways that it isn't now?
Shannon, you're not going to be surprised that I'm not going to get into what is now a political issue during a presidential election year. I don't think that would be helpful. I have one thought to add. It is that the independent judiciary means, what does it mean to you as an American? It means that when you're unpopular, you can get a fair hearing under the law and under the Constitution. If you're in the majority, you don't need judges and juries to hear you and protect your rights. You're popular. It's there for the moments when the spotlight's on you, when the government's coming after you. And don't you want a ferociously independent judge and a jury of your peers to make those decisions? Isn't that your right as an American? And so I just say, be careful.
That was Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch speaking to the heart of republicanism, which is due process, the right to a fair and speedy trial, the elimination of the arbitrary diktats of a hereditary ruler who could just put you in jail just because he was king. Now, we don't do it that way. Now, this system is not perfect. We're seeking a more perfect union. Right now, things wax and wane. Right now, it's the wane period. Things are waning. Well, hey, the institutions are fine. It's the people. We got a big job to do. But he's warning us about the importance of an independent judiciary. Changing the rules is part of politics. There's no complaining. As Steve Bannon used to say, there's no tears in the war room. There's no complaining. If we don't show up, they're just going to walk all over the top of us. There won't be any courts that make a difference. I have a whole plan in my mind about legal and lawyer issues because it's my theory of the case that what we're focused on, this elective politics, is a diversion. I think the action's in the law. That's where the action is, in the law schools and the law. This thing over here, elective politics, oh, it takes all our energy. It's a giant industry. Okay, big time. And what really changed? What really changed? Well, let's take a look at what really is changing and how that part of it works, because it does work. It just sucks up all the oxygen. We're going to start focusing on these lawyers. There's a lot of theater over here in elective politics, but let's look at something the Biden administration has put out and look at it to be informed about how things change. And this is a long piece. This is a 15-minute piece.
The bargain of the last half century or so was politicians saying to the American public, we're going to let factory work go abroad. Don't worry about that. Be bankers, be software engineers. Let China do the dirty jobs, and we'll get a lot of cheap stuff in the meantime. It was a very naive bargain.
There's been a consensus in this country for decades about how the economy should be run.
Can you stop it just for a second?
It's defined by neoliberalism.
I'm going to comment as we go through this. This is about the changes of how our economy is being tooled up. This lady is a leftist, and she's talking about neoliberalism, which is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, and she said it was a naive bargain. That is very manipulative. It was not a naive bargain. That's spin. Very intelligent people wrote down in journals what the deal was. There was nothing naive about it. They were very intentional in what they were doing. And naive is a scam. Please continue.
The Washington Consensus.
The neoliberal consensus, let's call it that.
Today you reached a new low, I think, by suggesting that manufacturing in America doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the product is produced.
Congressman, we have the highest standard of living in the world.
No, we do not.
For years, that system looked unstoppable.
It is the economic equivalent of a force of nature.
Until it wasn't.
Your husband signed NAFTA, which was one of the worst things that ever happened to the manufacturing industry.
That is your opinion.
You go to New England, you go to Ohio.
The consensus of the last 50 years is collapsing. In its place, something new is taking shape.
Stop, please.
And
okay, isn't that just what we've been saying here on the podcast? Now, this is done by the Biden administration. This is politics. This is called, people are going to get mad at me because this is a Hegelian dialectic. You know, there's thesis, there's antithesis, and there's synthesis. That's how the founding fathers, the framers, set our system up, that there would be dialogue and debate between two opposing forces or belief systems, and something better would come out of it. So, you know, what we have is faithlessness in our system. And our system is republicanism, and it's based on a 5,700-year tradition. And because our people have no faith, they have no faith in the system. Please continue.
And behind it is not who you'd expect.
Let me start off with two words. Made in America.
Wait, pause. Did you catch that?
Made in America.
Contained in those 3 words is actually a radical declaration, a plan to transform the American economy.
Stop, please. Now, this started under President Trump, and they're going to acknowledge that. They're going to acknowledge that, and they're going to talk about that. But President Trump was the first one that started to tout, isn't that beautiful? The 3 most beautiful words, made in America. You know, Biden shortened it down to 2 words. That's cool. Let's continue.
If you look at what Biden has done, it is a major, major sea change in how government has worked in the U.S. in the last 40 years.
Stop again. Yes, it's called leftism. It's called state centralized government planning, which is not republicanism. It's communism. Please continue.
An enormous break with a neoliberal consensus.
But to understand what Biden's plan actually is, you have to dive deep into the ideology that has shaped our economy for the last 50 years. For decades after World War II, unionized manufacturing jobs at companies like GE and GM had built the middle class. By 1970, middle-class households were taking home 62% of all income.
So if you were to look in the 1970s at the fortunes of workers, companies in the country, it would kind of move in tandem. They were linked in some way.
By the 1980s, they started to diverge.
There's a lot of deregulation, a lot of changes to tax policy that allow finance to just take off.
Stop, please. Scamming here. Yes, those were all downstream. The major issue was Nixon to continue the war machine with the Great Society simultaneously. You know, Lyndon Johnson started the Great Society, or as I'd like to call it, the Great Dependency, to keep everybody on the payroll. While we have a worldwide empire, Nixon removed the dollar from any relationship to an underlying asset. That would be gold. We financialized our economy and went to a fiat currency economy, and that allowed for every manner of corruption because nothing was real. So it's whatever you could make up. Go ahead, please.
One of the great emblems of this is GE. General Electric was one of the oldest corporations in America. It's one of the original innovators. But by the time the 80s and the 90s roll around, Jack Welch, Neutron Jack Welch as he was called, comes in and starts slashing and burning people.
He got rid of 100,000 GE employees.
You were criticized because you got rid of so many people.
Yep.
And you didn't pull back.
No.
You went forward with it.
Harder.
And this is another part of financialization where human beings, workers, are sort of looked at like widgets. Costs on the balance sheet to be moved off so companies can become more efficient, so that share prices can go up.
Stop, please. Doesn't that sound remarkably like the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy? See, they're watching, and they know people are figuring out we're inventory. So this is going to be their answer to it. Please continue.
Maximizing share prices was what mattered, and wealth began to shift away from workers, innovation, and manufacturing into financial assets like stocks, loans, and real estate.
You know, in the 80s, global capital was unleashed. Well, by the 90s, global trade started to be unleashed.
I was there at the beginning of the whole free trade thing. I saw some of the job losses coming, but I didn't see as many losses as actually did result.
Stop, please. This is Robert Reich, communist extraordinaire. He's a prolific poster on X. He said, I was there at the beginning. I saw some job losses coming. No, Robert, you're in this scam up to your eyeballs. I read everything you do. You suck then, you suck now. And you're just a salesman. You're just selling. So now you're kind of covering up because you don't want to lose your credibility with your communist followers. But actually, this all started under your watch, brother. This was your idea, brother. You are the poster child of neoliberalism, brother, because guess what neoliberalism is? It's global communism. Please continue.
Robert Reich was the Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton when NAFTA was signed into law. NAFTA eliminated trade barriers between the US, Canada, and Mexico.
The advocates of free trade believed that American consumers would benefit from cheaper goods coming from around the world. I was told and repeatedly assured by the advocates for NAFTA that American jobs would be protected by strict labor standards. The fact of the matter is that as labor secretary, every time I went to Mexico to try to enforce the labor standards, nothing happened.
All told, the US lost around 700,000 jobs from NAFTA. But an even bigger shock was about to hit the system. In 2000, Clinton normalized trade relations with China, supporting the country's entry into the World Trade Organization.
The addition of the Chinese economy to the global marketplace will result in a more efficient worldwide allocation of resources and will raise standards of living in China and its trading partners.
Chinese exports flooded America and really were responsible for a large percentage of the losses of manufacturing jobs in the United States.
And when the jobs disappeared, the shops, the banks, the people disappeared too.
Between 1998 and 2021, the U.S. lost more than 5 million manufacturing jobs due to trade policies.
There's no future here. With 75% of your refrigerators being built in Mexico.
They promised basically jobs for our kids if they wanted them. That's not happening.
There was a real Faustian bargain that was made in the 1990s onward. We outsourced our entire industrial commons in exchange for cheap stuff. We decided to stop making.
That is not what we did. That's the cover story. What we did was we started to establish one world governance. Corporations running everything in fascist alliance with government. And one of the things that had to happen along this road to get to this one world governance, where human beings were reduced to be an inventory, was the freedom of Americans had to be taken away in every possible perspective. So, they're not telling the whole story. They're telling the story they want to tell. We got to look at the whole story. None of this was by accident. Every bit of it was on purpose and was about eliminating the self-governance of sovereign American citizens. Because, hey, it's hard to govern a bunch of sovereigns. They might not do what you tell them to do. Let's continue.
Making things and start consuming things.
Oh, yeah. Let's consume things.
One of the beauties, in some ways, of the neoliberal system, at least for those that were buying into it, is that it was simple. As long as share prices were going up and consumer prices were going down, there was no problem. As long as companies were getting richer, things were supposedly fine.
Amidst all of that wealth creation, America's middle class saw its share of national income decline.
That's the sort of dirty little secret of neoliberalism, which is that, yeah, the pie got bigger, but fewer people got a slice of it.
Stop, please. Now you're getting into some super incredible lying. Like they don't want this to happen. They're going to turn it around. Did you see how the share of the pie got smaller for American citizens? Because all the wealth is aggregating to the top and all the shit's coming downhill on me? Okay. She's going to now spend the rest of this piece telling us how great they are. Actually, that was very purposeful, and it's going on at full speed today. We'll talk about it as we go through the rest of it, please.
The things that make us middle class, education, healthcare, housing, the price of these things didn't go down. Indeed, the price of these things rose.
Stop. Why did the price of these things go up? Because the government got involved in all of them. There was no government involved in the education system in the 60s except for funding military research. Now, probably $1 trillion a year gets spent on the university system between loans to students and direct grants to these universities. They're on the government payroll, the entire university system. Housing, come on. There's a government program for sure. Healthcare, Obamacare. Prices keep going up. Why? Because the government is making sure they go up in the interest of equity. Let's go on.
At the same time you get a lot of cheap consumer goods, you also get a cost of living crisis. So it's a very dangerous paradox.
Please welcome the next president of the United States, Mr. Donald J. Trump.
It took, I think, essentially the 2016 election where both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump critiqued that mainstream view for policymakers in Washington to really wake up to the reality of what they had wrought.
They say Trump is starting a trade war. I say no. The trade war ended a long time ago, and the United States lost because our leaders didn't take care of our people and our companies. The era of global freeloading and taking advantage of the United States is over. It's just over.
There was a kind of a coming to Jesus moment under Trump, but the problem with the Trump administration is it didn't have any policy prescription for the U.S. itself. It
Stop,
simply said,
please. Okay, this is not true. See, now we're getting into the deep lying. Because, she's a Democrat. She's a communist. She's going to tell us, she's about to tell us how great the communists are. First of all, there was deep policy. I was involved in it. I was moved by it. It moved me so much that I disconnected as much of my supply as I could from China. Okay? That's pretty strong. The idea was to convince individual sovereign citizens that as Republicans, and I don't mean the party, I mean as Republicans, we need to think about our neighbor as we would like our neighbor to think of ourselves. I've said on this podcast many times, I've been in many trade cases, and I looked and I was moved by the suffering of my fellow citizens. And I recognized that what I was doing, I couldn't live with it because I believe in the search for truth. And you know what I found out? I mean, I'm sure there's a couple other people like me in the supply chain, but mostly everybody's in it for the money. I get it. They're materialists. That's not why I'm doing this podcast. And what the Trump administration did and what Steve Bannon did when he was in the administration and what Peter Navarro was doing was trying to create a cultural change in the business community so that we would choose freely as free citizens to invest in America. I did it. Other people did it. We'll talk about what happened as we go through this piece. I remember Steve Bannon said to my lawyer in a meeting when my lawyer told him that, Penn gets it. He understands what you're doing. And Bannon looked at him and said, "You mean he really gets it?" Because people didn't get what was going on. Maybe the idea was not well articulated, the importance of America. But these people, because in politics, he who has the power picks up the baton and runs with it. Watch them run. Please continue.
China's bad. We're going to slap tariffs on China.
But at the same time, another more ambitious policy plan was being developed elsewhere. A senior advisor to Hillary Clinton was shaken by the loss in 2016. He traveled to Ohio, Colorado, and Nebraska to talk to Americans from across the political spectrum. The result was a report, Foreign Policy for the Middle Class, co-authored by Jake Sullivan.
My national security advisor, I choose Jake Sullivan, and it helps steer what I call a foreign policy for the middle class.
Stop, please. Stop. Okay, middle class. How's that 8% interest working for you? How's that forever war working for you? How's that open border working for you? These people, when they talk, they lie. When their lips move, what comes out is lies. But let's continue and see how the sausage gets made. Please continue.
Comes in and says, we need an entirely new philosophy of growth.
It's based on a simple premise that will reward work, not wealth in this country.
He's created what some people would call Bidenomics, what some people would call a post-neoliberal world.
Stop right there. Neoliberalism, the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, is the belief that we could put everybody on the U.S. payroll. China, Russia, Botswana, Rwanda, the Ukraine, Israel, Egypt, Qatar, Iran. We're going to get everybody on the payroll, and it's all going to be one happy family making money together. No more war. And we're going to run the whole thing with our financialized dollar. We're going to be the top of the heap. And you know what a lot of these people said? No, we don't like your faithlessness. We believe in something else. For the Chinese, it was in the Chinese ethnic identity, ethno-nationalist state. For the Russians, it's with the Russians, they're ethno-nationalists, and they believe in Christianity. For the Jews, ethno-nationalism, and they believe in God. The Qataris, the UAE, Saudi, Iran, these people had other belief systems. They rejected the godlessness of neoliberalism and the materialism of the neoliberal post-World War II Democrat liberal order project. And this is their response. Please continue. It's called
One
evolution.
second that the vitality of American manufacturing is a thing of the past.
What this means is that he's decided to prioritize not just share prices and not just consumers, but jobs, incomes, communities.
Today,
Stop,
we're
please.
getting...
Stop, please. Yes, he's not just considering shareholders and wealth. What he's doing is transforming our country into a 100% war economy. A war economy. Please continue.
work to rebuild the backbone of America.
The backbone of America, the
Manufacturing,
war
unions,
economy.
middle class.
Over
Like
the past
World War
4
II.
years, the Biden administration has quietly translated that worldview into a multi-trillion-dollar set of policies.
You have to go back to the 50s when the statistics were created to find anything comparable to the level of manufacturing investment that we see right now.
That investment can be broken down into 3 pieces of legislation: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law,
A massive infrastructure bill,
the Inflation Reduction Act,
helping to fuel a boom in clean energy all across the United States,
and the CHIPS and Science Act.
Boosting domestic semiconductor production.
We have not seen an infrastructure program this big since the Eisenhower era. We haven't seen ambition that government could do this much, I would argue, since FDR.
Stop.
Under Biden.
Stop. Okay. 3 giant pieces of legislation. What they're doing is they're domesticating a giant military expansion. What's being invested in is not furniture making or tire building or building toys. What's being invested in is clean energy, which makes everybody poor. Okay, that is a shifting of wealth away from one group of people to another. That's what government does. It takes money from one group and gives it to another. They're creating a new group of oligarchs that are under their control. I mean, the communist control. They're investing in military manufacturing, semiconductor manufacturing, the CHIPS Act. Go read it. It's about 100 pages long. It's about the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is going to eliminate jobs. I mean, you want to talk about eliminating jobs? That would be robotics and AI. These people are touting this as being a worker-centric program when in reality, it's going to eliminate workers and put everybody on universal basic income, which is their goal. That is the goal. And you need the infrastructure now, a revival of infrastructure to move all this new military investment around the country. That's my opinion. Please continue.
Investment in manufacturing construction has surged to more than triple the average rate of the 2010s. And those investments are flowing disproportionately to counties where unemployment is highest.
It could be ultimately trillions of dollars that get invested in the economy.
Stop that, please. Did you see that one there, biomanufacturing? What the hell is biomanufacturing? You ask yourself, they put it right up there. Did you see that slide on by? It's like genetically modified everything. Please continue.
At what private industry is focused on in recent decades, like stock buybacks and other policies that redistribute income upwards. Instead, we're seeing companies invest in real places with real workers for the first time in generations.
How's it been? How's it impacted your life?
Man, tremendously. My life completely changed, man. I got things now that I never thought I could have.
Now we're in a position to where we have 19, 20-year-old people that are working and are thinking about their future.
It sets you up for the future, medical, dental, vision, pension, something to fall back on when it's all over with.
After decades of stagnating wages...
Stop, please. Stop. You see what he said? Medical, dental, vision, a pension, something to fall back on. This is the end of self-governance. It's the dependency on government. And what they're investing in is the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is a military effort at the level of, like she said, since FDR, when they made the nuclear bomb. What was the high point of FDR? The Manhattan Project. Boy, government hasn't done anything like this since we made the nuclear bomb. What they're making now is the 4th Industrial Revolution. That's the end of human freedom. But they're touting it as so great because they lie when they talk. They lie. Continue, please.
These investments are creating well-paid jobs with good benefits. And that's by design.
There's something called the investment tax credit that's a part of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Think of it like layers in a cake.
What it does is say that the public sector will help businesses cover 6% of their capital cost if they are just investing in a clean energy technology that we find interesting. But you can get 5 times that.
Stop. What does that mean, that we find interesting? Who's we? Who are these people? These people are perverting the free market. This is communism you're looking at here. This is communism. Now look at how they are going to determine who makes money. Watch this pie. Watch this. You're going to like it.
Amount. If you're also paying prevailing wages and running apprenticeship programs, you can get an additional 20% of that if you're investing in a low-income community, 10% if you are investing in a community that's been historically reliant on the fossil fuel industry, and an additional 10% on top of that if you are using made-in-America supply chains. If you take all of the layers in the cake, companies could see up to 70% of their capital cost covered.
These types of policies are an attempt to shift companies away.
Boy, I would love to get 70% of my overhead covered. I'd make a lot of money if the government can. And who's the government? That's me. I'm paying some prick that is in league in a fascist kind of way with our government 70% of his overhead. So he makes that money as profit, and I'm paying for it, and I don't get any of the benefits, and neither do you. That's what they're doing. They're picking winners and losers. This is called, at the best, you could call this communism at the best. This is fascism. You're looking at fascism. Fascism, like the Nazis. Please continue.
From the financial logic that has dominated corporate behavior for decades.
Take an example like Cleveland-Cliffs. This is one of the country's premier steel manufacturers. In recent decades, they've engaged a lot in stock buybacks to reward their shareholders. Now they're working with the United Steelworker Union to build clean steel in places across the country.
But in a global economy built by decades of free trade, what's to stop jobs like these from getting wiped out again?
You're about to get a clear view of China's capacity to build.
This is a really big moment for the global economy.
The US has accused China of a practice called dumping, flooding the market with a surplus of goods, like electric vehicles or solar panels, at artificially low prices.
We've seen this story before. When the global market is flooded by artificially cheap Chinese products, the viability of American firms is put into question.
China has that surplus in part thanks to years of careful planning and massive government subsidies. But weak environmental and labor standards are also a factor.
The worry is that if we are just importing the lowest cost products, that it will undermine labor standards here at home and undermine the US economy.
Biden has kept Trump's China tariffs in place and recently announced new tariffs on Chinese goods.
I thought Trump was right to put tariffs on China. I think Biden was right to continue them. Not for punitive reasons, but because within the current system, China is not playing by the rules of the game.
Stop, please. Couple of things there. They're not dumping anything. It's not artificially cheap. They're far more organized because they're communist, openly communist. What we're doing here in our crazy theater is we're becoming just like them with state central planning, which Trump didn't want to do. They were trying to encourage the business community. Didn't work. Rules of the game. Whose rules? Our rules. Yeah, the Chinese aren't playing by our rules. They're rejecting neoliberalism. It's not that these people have some great idea. They're getting their neoliberalism jammed right up their ass, and they're trying to come up with a different idea to save it. And that's another thing we're going to talk about, but we're running out of time. Let's finish this piece.
The Biden administration's tariffs on China are targeted in the same sectors where it's investing at home, like steel, semiconductors, and clean energy.
Stop right there. Steel, that's what weapons are made out of. Semiconductors, that's what weapons are made of. And clean energy, that's how you make everybody poor. Let's continue.
Goal is to protect the jobs created in those sectors from being undercut by cheaper imports.
You simply cannot say, I'm going to outsource the entire clean energy transition to one country and not have any of those jobs in my own country and expect there to be a country left after that.
Sounds just like Trump.
Just like it took 40 years for neoliberalism to play out, it's going to take many years and even decades for the post-neoliberal era to play out.
Stop. Lie. This is the neoliberal era. It's the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. They're trying to morph more into neoliberalism, which is to create communism, a communist formation, a fascist relationship between government and business in our country, exactly the same as in China and as in Russia. To do what? To fight with them. Nothing really changed. We're just going to war. Hey, who wins on that deal? Same people that won during peace are going to win during war. Doesn't matter what side of the football they're playing on. They got both sides rigged. Let's finish this piece.
You look at, for example, in upstate New York, what's happening with the building of a semiconductor industry from the ground up. That's a 10-year process. Big sea changes, like the one we're going through, are complicated. They're complicated to message. It's hard to say we're moving from one political economy to another. That's not something that you message on Fox or MSNBC.
Stop right there. No, what is a political economy? That's the country. That's not something you'd say on Fox or MSNBC, that we're changing from republicanism to communism. Whoa, that wouldn't play very well. You see, they're so arrogant, they tell the truth right when the words that they can't help themselves. They're PhDs. Please continue.
Biden's new economic worldview hasn't been at the center of most political coverage. Instead, we get coverage like this.
During his speech, the president made a gaffe, saying, quote, "Let me start off with 2 words.
Made in America.
Okay, stop again. You see how sophisticated these people are? They're now blaming they're blaming the media that they control for running a diversion that they want. I mean, these people are so much smarter than we are. It's unbelievable. Please continue.
Made in America.
But there is a coherent policy experiment happening here, a response to decades of neoliberal economics. Whether voters choose to continue that experiment could dramatically shape the future of the American economy.
So I think after one term of Trump and one term of Biden, we have a decent sense of how they're going to govern. Trump broke with the neoliberal era when it came to trade, but he kept in place a lot of neoliberal policies like cutting taxes for the rich and deregulation.
We've tried neoliberalism. What happened during those 45 years was that wages stagnated, Wall Street exploded, big banks got bailouts. Most Americans really came out on the short end. And it pains me to say this because I was part of previous administrations. I was in the Carter administration. I was Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration. I think that these administrations accomplished a lot of good things. But looking back historically, those administrations did not change the neoliberal consensus. Joe Biden is changing it.
Yeah, isn't that great? We're going full-blown communist under Uncle Joe Biden. And then if we get Kamala, oh, they're going to just double down on this. No, this is neoliberalism. They're just going to rebrand it as, I don't know what they're going to call it. Equity. They're going to rebrand this as equity. And defending democracy and saving the planet from climate change. You know, they're just moving the stuff around on the board. The net result is the 5,700-year tradition of peace, the search for peace and truth. Hey, let's forget about that. We got a better idea. And on that unhappy note, I'm actually in a pretty good mood. This was a great piece. You know what's great about it? These people are so smart. You see, we have to up our game. That's why we're doing the Professor Penn podcast. Bring people in because we got to get really we got to put some time into this. We're fighting PhDs that control all the levers of power. If we're going to save our freedom, we are going to have to be smarter than they are. And guess what? It won't be hard to do because they're arrogant. Have a great weekend. Vote next Tuesday, August 13th in the Minnesota primary. I want to thank you for joining. I want to wish you well. We're going to go out with something really cool from the Commodores. Tanner, have a great weekend. Thanks very much for joining.
It began when they were all freshmen at Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama, and for 5 years they've studied hard and played hard together and should be commended for that. Their reward, of course, has been twofold. They got a good education and they've become one of the hottest groups around. How about it, gang, for the Commodores?